So on day 2, my father and I decided to actually do a little sightseeing around Niagara, not just the falls. And we actually came across this free shuttle service that is available for all tourists. We kind of were hesitant at first, but when we did find out it actually was free. So we saw the map of all the different destinations that Niagara has to offer for tourists, not just the falls like I said. So it has anything that has to do with museums, to cemeteries, state parks, and even an old fort settlement that was basically discovered all the way back in the 1700s. So that actually caught our very good attention right there. So we were very surprised that there was no other tourists besides us going around Niagara, but that was actually pretty cool because our bus driver Jerry was very knowledgeable of everything that has to do with Niagara Falls. He's been a native there all the way since he was young. Pretty cool guy. He actually convinced us to actually go to the Old Fort Niagara because it was actually one of the best places to go in Niagara besides the falls. So before actually seeing the fort up close, you actually had to go through a mini museum of telling you why Niagara was a very important part of American history. So a little history of Old Fort Niagara, it actually spans more than 300 years. During the colonial wars in North America, a fort at the mouth of the Niagara River was vital, for it controlled access to the Great Lakes and a westward route to the heartland of the continent. With the completion of the Erie Canal in 1825, however, the strategic value of Fort Niagara diminished. It nonetheless remained an active military post well into the 20th century. A fun fact, there's actually 3 flags that are flown daily above the parade ground that symbolizes the nations which held Fort Niagara, and those nations were France, Great Britain, and the United States. And each of those different nations actually have an important part to play in the little mini museum. So when you're going around the museum, you're noticing all the different artifacts, the memorabilia, and how each of those nations was an important vital part of Niagara's history. So as you're walking through the museum, you're noticing all the muskets, the bayonets, the uniforms, how things were during those times of the 1700s, and why was it very important part of American history during the American Revolution, the Civil War, the War of 1812, even all the way to the world wars that were happening later in the 20th century. So before going in, you actually had to see a mini presentation of a movie, and then we could finally go out. So as we actually are moving inside the fort, I actually start noticing that I kind of looked at my dad and I asked him, it almost feels like we're in a video game called Assassin's Creed 3. Now, if you know this game very well, it actually takes place during the American Revolution. It almost looked like that. I was kind of drawing parallels between Connor and going into the fort, fighting the British and fighting the Templars. And what's really funny was I was actually wearing an Assassin's Creed hat, and a lot of the staff there that actually are wearing colonial clothing actually noticed that, and they asked me to take a picture with them. And I actually obliged, and I kind of wanted to do my best Assassin's Creed impression. And as we were going inside the fort and all the different buildings that it had, I just kept thinking about just the different levels that were in Assassin's Creed 3. And now it was not just about history, it was actually about video game lore of the Assassin's Creed franchise. So next was actually a pretty cool demonstration of how they were actually going to fire a cannonball in front of everyone.
Gun crew, make ready! And as for all of you, take your hands, karate chop them against your head, let your jaw hang slack to relieve the pressure, and prepare for the best. Fire! Secure the piece. And that happens once every 30 seconds on the battlefield, ladies and gentlemen.
So after that demonstration, now we can actually see more of the Fort Niagara. And like I said before, each of those symbols that you see on top of each of the building represents which nation was actually in charge of the fort. So you see a lot of how things were during the 16th, 17th century during the occupation of Fort Niagara between France, Great Britain, and the United States. We went to the very last place of Fort Niagara, which was an actual storage of very old cannons and muskets. So my father and I actually had a little fun, and we actually posed with the muskets. Here's my dad trying to look all cool like a revolutionary hero, and then me myself trying to get my best Connor impression from Assassin's Creed 3. But overall, it was a very fun experience. It wasn't planned. The only thing that was kind of disappointing is that there are no multi-languages available for this type of park. So I had to do my best to translate everything to my dad, and he appreciated it. But overall, we liked it. We breathed in the history. So we decided after that it was time to head back to the hotel, get some dinner, and finish day 2 of Niagara. So make sure you stay tuned for day 3 next week. See you soon.